Hello, everyone joining us at home. Today is Friday, August 23rd. You're joining the Rebel Roundup, our bi-weekly or our twice weekly live stream. And today I am your co-host, Tamara Lich, joined by my lovely colleague and friend in British Columbia, Drea Humphrey. Before we get started, hey, Drea, how are you doing over there in BC?
I'm doing good. It's a rainy summer day. It's been so rainy the last couple of weeks, but I'm happy to see you on the live again. It's been a while.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a little bit rusty. Usually it's Sheila and or David Menzies that's joining you, but we have everybody in various parts of the country today. And Sheila, our editor-in-chief, is taking a much needed and well-deserved day off today. So we're here filling in for you at home joining us. We are streaming on both YouTube and Rumble. However, unfortunately, YouTube is funded primarily by the pharmaceutical industry, which we like to be skeptical of, and rightfully so. Journalists used to always be skeptical of that oligarch industry worth trillions of dollars. So we have been demonetized completely from YouTube, and now we have the Rumble platform that's coming in to try to save free speech. And so for anyone joining us over on YouTube, I would urge you to switch over to the Rumble platform, because there you can support us in our work and also support Rumble in their endeavor to preserve freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And so in doing so, you can give us what's called a Rumble rant. And again, that supports us and the Rumble platform. And anything over or at $5 US donation, we will read here live on air. We have a jam-packed schedule to run through, so I'm hoping that we can get to everything, because we're trying some new things here where we also read Rumble ads. And so a little QR code, if you're over on the Rumble platform, will show up on your screen. And while I'm reading the ad, if you're interested in what is being advertised to you, you can scan that QR code and be directed and find out a little bit more. So if we want to try to read as many as possible in the stream, and again, that supports our work, that supports us here at Rebel News to keep fighting for freedom and free speech, and supports the Rumble platform to give us this platform to reach all of you at home. So first on the docket here, we have Positive. Now, if you have a dog, we've all been there. Our pup goes from full of energy to sick and miserable in an instant, and as always, at the worst of times. Then we're calling vets in the middle of the night or on weekends, trying to find a clinic that will take us in. It's a terrible way to manage your dog's health, not to mention your stress levels and your monthly budget. That's why you should have a pet emergency kit by Positive. It contains critical medications and supplies that can not only keep you out of the veterinary office, but may even save your dog's life. Their kits contain critical medications like activated charcoal, styphic powder, and more. It might save your dog's life. Head over to positive.com and use code STUDIO to get 15% off your pet emergency kit. I don't know about you, Drea, but the vet clinics and their bills are absolutely outrageous. So anything that can help try to even offset that financial stress is so worth it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I won't get too into it, but we had a pup. I didn't know that dogs were allergic to certain essential oils, and spider egg hatched in my home, and I was trying to like deal with that. My poor dog got so sick at like 2 a.m. And so it's so important to have something like this in place, because the bill gets insane, especially if they don't even know what's wrong with the dog, because I didn't know at first.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
He's
Okay,
good now.
so glad to hear that. And we have first on the agenda are some legal updates happening in Ottawa with the Tamara Lich and Chris Barber trial. I think it's day 44 or 45, the longest running trial for mischief in this country are the Freedom Convoy organizers for the crime of simply peaceful assembly and protesting government edicts, mandates, all of the diktats that were being implemented and pushed indiscriminately onto Canadians during the COVID-19 mandates, specifically the cross-border travel mandates for truckers. And so we saw that Canada led the way there and led the trucker convoy or protest that created a rippling effect across the globe, around the world. We have seen similar tactics deployed by people who no longer feel that they are being representative by their elected officials and having their voices heard. And so as a result, Tamara Lich and Chris Barber have been on trial for several months, spanning various days here and there. We have David Menzies deployed to Ottawa today, where it's suspected and hoped that the defense, Lawrence Greenspun, for Tamara Lich will give his closing arguments and the judge will deliberate. But there's been so many mix-ups and clarifications over evidence and the Crown's argument, and I'd like to use some choice words here, but I'll refrain. And so it's been a bit of a mess, and we're not really sure that today will actually be the last day. But nonetheless, David Menzies is on the scene. He's live tweeting through his Twitter account, and we have a little video to share with you, just a quick report and update from David Menzies. So maybe we should just throw to that first.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Ottawa. And folks, the marathon trial for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, the organizers of the Freedom Convoy of 2022, it continues today. And if memory serves, this is day 44 of a mischief trial. And just think about that. Mischief. Mischief is usually something like, a kid spray painting the wall of a building. The idea that this is a trial that would go on for 44 days, let alone 4 hours, it's utterly preposterous. We have seen in the past 10 months in the streets of our great dominion, the pro-Hamas thugs going out and openly chanting for genocide. And what is the reaction? Well, the police do nothing. Actually, that's not quite true. In the case of the Toronto Police Service, they bring the members of the Hitler Youth Movement coffee and Timbits. You want to keep them hydrated and well fed. Also, let's go back to the Black Lives Matter protests. Justin Trudeau himself took part in those demonstrations. He actually took a knee against the prime minister, which he is, I suppose, whatever. But when it comes to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber and everybody else that was part of the Freedom Convoy, these are Canadians with so-called unacceptable views, and they must be punished. We don't know how the judge is going to rule, but even if it's a not guilty verdict, given the time spent on this, and by the way, millions and millions of taxpayer dollars, the process is the penalty, wouldn't you say? Well, today, superstar lawyer Lawrence Greenspan, he will be representing Tamara Lich, and it should make for fascinating testimony, to say the least. I'll be in the court live tweeting, so there is more to come. Let's hope this is the final day of this farcical trial, because that's what it is. Well, actually, it's worse than farcical. In my view, it's a miscarriage of justice. I think this is a vendetta against Tamara Lich and company by the Crown, because for the amount of time and the amount of money spent on this, it is equal parts outrageous and egregious. But like I said, Lawrence Greenspan will be in the courthouse today. It should make for fascinating viewing. Stay tuned.
Drea, what are your thoughts on this? It is absolutely absurd. And I love that David mentioned the financial expenditure on this, because it's in the millions.
Well, that's really key. I mean, so much of it is key. Clearly, these were political prisoners. He also mentioned what mischief usually is. You know, you tag something on the side of a building and you get mischief, and maybe you're going to pick up garbage or something like this. They went to jail. Much of Tamara's jail time, I believe, was in solitary as well, which is insane. And then you have this mischief child going on this long. One thing that always stands out to me, though, is when I see Tamara when she's going in and out, and our footage that we catch and things like that, it's just the smile, and she's so radiant and just glowing. And I think if I was in that position, I don't think I would be like that. She is just such a graceful person. And you saw that in the actual trucker movement. You saw her saying, hey, I think at one point she said, let's not even use the F word. And here she is, and company, like David says, still being persecuted to this day. It's such a disgrace.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the other aspect here is that Tamara Lich is a Métis grandmother. Like and she's petite. She is the most non-threatening person I think I've almost ever come across, other than a child. She is peaceful, and the evidence that's come out in her and Chris Barber's defense, remaining peaceful, stressing the importance of that all throughout this process, is, in my view, undeniable at this point. And the fact that the Crown just continues to grasp at straws and try to hold this charge to them, it'll be a really interesting day for Canadian justice, depending on what Justice McVitie comes back with in these proceedings, and whether or not this is going to extend even further into September. So I guess we will find out, and stay tuned. And of course, we are crowdfunding Tamara Lich's legal defense at helptamara.com. And if you want to stay up to date with our reports and check out our previous reports on this coverage and the whole saga from the onset of the Freedom Convoy to where we are here now, 2-3 years later, you can do that at that website. And speaking of mischief, Drea, the next topic we have is to discuss something that's happened to you and your family, which is so disturbing to think about. But when you're speaking truth and you're pushing back on mainstream narratives, sometimes, sadly, that comes with this kind of territory. So for our viewers who aren't familiar, maybe you can run through what you've been up against the last week or so.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate. I mean, it is a good bridge from what's happening as far as Tamara Lich goes, because look what's happening to them versus what's happened to this individual who has actually not just threatened me, but now threatened one of my children. And that's the story that we dropped yesterday. Unfortunately, many of you probably know, Jessica Simpson, formerly by their better known name, Jonathan Yaniv, is just a menace to society, violent trans activist. In the report, I show you that Jessica Simpson's also racist. I didn't make a big deal about that before, some of the things that Simpson has said about me. But when you're threatening my child, that's a whole nother level, because this individual has already assaulted our journalists at Rebel News on the stand when I covered the assault that Simpson was found guilty for on our former colleague, Kian Bexty. It came out that he has a hate for Rebel News reporters. And so now what has happened, I don't know if we can put it on the screen. it was brought to my attention, because of course I'm blocked, so I don't see this individual's posts on X all the time, but it was brought to my attention by several people, a concerning tweet that Simpson had done. There it is on the screen right there. And so he says that he's basically going to come for my child. And if you know anything about this person's track history, it's not just that they're violent, they're actually a predator when it looks like children, messaging children inappropriately and doing a lot of things online. Like when I think of what an individual like this can do, who makes up fake accounts. There's a little bit of audio in the report where you hear Simpson discussing making up a fake account in my name, which I believe Simpson has done before, and I have reason to believe that. But when you think of things like, the Amanda Todd situation, where these teens get into situations online for people that they think are their friends, I don't know what this individual has in mind. Is it something like that, where they want to destroy my child's life, or is it physical? So it's quite concerning. In the report, I let you know I did do a full police report, but this individual has assaulted our journalist in front of the courthouse, right at the courthouse steps, and actually threatened me. I don't know if we have a clip, but you can see there's a sheriff just watching while this large biological male is charging at me and threatening me with their dog. So it is very serious. We've created a whole website called protectdrea.com. We're going to be upping our security, because we already have a lot of security when we go anywhere near this individual. It's about 150 an hour. It is 150 hour per security guard. We usually have 2 by my side, thankfully, because let's face it, the cops aren't keeping us safe. The sheriffs aren't keeping us safe. And if you're wondering why we're so vigilant at covering this individual, it's to show the bias in the court system. I only mentioned what this individual has done to us, but they've done so much things to others, threatening other people, brandishing a legal weapon, things like that, that I always say, if you and I were doing it, we'd be locked up for years, yet they've never spent a day. You know what I mean? So that's why we're showing that this individual goes in. They're violent. They're inappropriate with minors, firefighters, the whole work. And they don't get jail time. So we're following this to expose the lenient court system. This has been years of this. And the threats come in, unfortunately, when you're telling the other side of the story, because nobody wants to touch a racist, violent, trans activist, but Rebel News apparently, and sometimes that comes with risk. So protectdrea.com, if you can chip in to help us recoup some of the costs to keep us safe for our reporting on here. And I should throw in there that I believe this last threat was a retaliation of sorts to the legal win we did. This is another thing that you won't see done by the mainstream media, the state-backed news. We actually, because I got blocked in my reporting on what this individual was up when it comes to the latest attempts to take down an autistic journalist, if you would believe it. And there was all these publication bans, because Simpson always says that they're a victim of transphobia and therefore they need protection. So we actually successfully had those publication bans taken down, and that cost us $5,000 too. But we're focusing on security because that's most important, and we can't disclose everything we're going to be doing there, but we're taking it into our own hands to keep me safe.
Yeah, you see the complete inaction by police officers all across the country throughout the last few years, and that's concerning in and of itself. But the threat there, I'm just getting started. We don't want to take any risks with you out in the field, and especially when it involves the threatening of a minor and your child. This is so concerning and so unfortunate that is the socio-political, social landscape that we live in currently. I see that we have a Rumble rant coming in already, so I might just try to go through those as they come in, as we go to ad breaks and go through the news. Ryerson Gary gives $5. Thanks so much. Considering how Justin has gone over the ultimate class act, Tamara, thank you. Just imagine the contempt he has for the rest of us. Yeah, and I think that Ryerson Gary is referring here to the French leadership debates that we covered in the snap election in 2021, where I basically asked Trudeau about having to go to court in order to cover and simply ask questions of our supposedly democratically elected leaders and what he thought about that. And he, despite the fact that a judge had found us to be credible enough to go into and cover the leadership of debates and ask questions of the potential leaders, he refused to acknowledge our existence as a media organization, referred to us as a group of individuals, and the usual rhetoric of spewing hate and misinformation and so on and so forth. And in that moment, when I think I had approximately a 7-month-old home with me. So I was, half on maternity leave, half working. It was late at night. I think it was almost midnight by the time we got to the question period. And I so badly wanted to ask a follow-up question and say, something along the lines of, with all due respect, Prime Minister Trudeau, your government has been the largest purveyor of and disinformation throughout the COVID hysteria. And I was ready to, name off a few instances, whether that be the efficacy of the novel injections or the safety of repurposed drugs and the science behind, 6 feet social distancing rule and the masking. Like you could literally go on and on and on. But anyway, they didn't allow follow-up questions at that time. So it is what it is. But I think that is what Ryerson Gary is referring to when he, quote unquote, went after me in that despicable response. And it actually went viral. So if anybody isn't familiar, you could go into the depths of the internet and find a clip of that, especially through Rebel News or on our Twitter X account. We have another one here from Billy Howard, gives $2. Thank you so much. Good luck and stay safe, Drea. But Yaniv is a publicity expletive, and every time you bring it up, you feed the monster. It's a double-edged sword in that way, I guess.
Yeah, well, let's make it clear. I certainly don't report on everything that Simpson does. But the point is, in British Columbia in particular, we have an extremely lenient system. And it's not the first time I've seen where it comes to transgenderism in the courts actually bow to that ideology over the law. If you look at some of the cases that I've covered, when we talk about publication bans, when there is a trans person involved, there are publication bans like you have never seen before. So it's not just a Yaniv beat that I'm on. It's on a broader picture. What is happening in the courtrooms? And just like an individual who says, hey, I can just go into the women and kids swimming thing. I can put on a wig and say I'm a trans. Is that now becoming an excuse to assault people, to have illegal weapons, to be a complete menace to society? It's to utter threats, not just to me, but other people too. And I have reason to believe that this autistic journalist, it's very possible, I won't get into it too much because I'm still investigating, but it's very possible that individual spent 39 days in jail because of lies, which include claims of transphobia that were made against him by Simpson. So this is a big story in Canada, and it's all intertwined. And I don't feel it's a service to Canadians to let it go.
Well, that's just it. It's of the public interest. And so reporting on some of these topics are of great public interest. And so it's balancing that public interest versus not feeding the monster, as Billy Howard puts it. And so I think you're doing a great job with that, by the way. But let's go to a quick ad break, and then we'll come back with some more.
Hi, everybody. As you know, every year we do a fundraiser for Rebel News that's super fun. It's a Rebel News cruise. We all go on a cruise ship together. We have dinner with each other. We have seminars when the ship's at sea, like Q&A sessions. And the rest of the time is your own. It's a vacation. It's a way to connect with other Rebel News enthusiasts. It's a way to check in with me and Sheila Gunn-Reid and Drea Humphrey and David Menzies. Tons of rebels are on the trip, And at the end of the day, it's a way to keep Rebel News strong because there's a little extra added to the cost, which is how we float the boat here at Rebel News. It's a fundraiser. Here's the next Rebel News cruise in case you've always wanted to go on one. It sets sail out of Vancouver June 18th, 2025. It's a week-long, June 18 to 25, 2025, and it's Vancouver to Alaska. So it's a lot easier to get to than a Caribbean cruise where you have to fly to Florida to set sail. Starts in Vancouver, where I'll greet you, Sheila, David, Alexa Lavoie, Drea Humphrey. It's a super fun trip. I've done it before. We go to Skagway, which is where the gold rush started. We go to Glacier National Park, which is as beautiful as it sounds. Go to rebelnewscruise.com to learn more, to check the pricing, and to book your cabin. Just let me rattle off some of the details of the places we're going. It's called the Alaska Inside Passage Cruise. If you know what that means, you go up right along the coast. It's on Holland America, so it's nice. It's the MS Zandam. That's the name of the ship. Obviously, we start off in Vancouver, next the Tracy Arm Inlet, then Juneau, the capital of Alaska, Skagway, by far my favorite city. It's amazing. Then Glacier Bay. Maybe the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. Back to Ketchikan and then down to Vancouver. If you like cruising, this is a super way to do it with fellow travelers, ideologically speaking. If you've never cruised before, this is a great way to start. And if you've been on Rebel News cruises, well, you don't want to miss this one. Again, for details, go to rebelnewscruise.com. It's next June, so just under a year away, but not too soon to order and to get the early bird discount. I'll see you at sea.
Oh, that looks like such a great time. I think, Drea, are you scheduled to be on that one?
I am. I can't wait. And I actually ran, because you went on the Jamaica one, did you?
Yeah, the Caribbean. Mm-hmm.
The Caribbean. So I ran into, a Rebel supporter the other day last week, and he brought up you actually, and he said, I actually went on the cruise. I was really curious to see if the Rebels are who they really say or act like they are. So he was actually looking at you guys for this reason. And he said, everybody was so great. And he said he spent time with you and it was just so comfortable. And he said he just felt like more like part of the Rebel team. Mm-hmm. And now that when he watches our reports, he's like, yeah, I know those people, and so you're kind of taking on the troubles of Canada together in a more personal and intimate way. So
well, that's
I'm
just
very
it. You
excited
get
to experience that
and mingle with people on that more personal level and discover bits and pieces of their personality that you otherwise might not. And mm-hmm. even for me to meet some of our supporters and get to know them a little bit better was lots of fun. And on the other side, for them to see who we are as people outside of, in front of a screen, joining you from your computer or your TV. So it was lots of fun. It was my first real Rebel trip experience. And I must say that there was a lot of coffee that got me through because we had a jammed schedule in there, whether it be the excursions or the roundtables that we were hosting and the topics we were talking about. There wasn't a lot of downtime on the trip itself, which for me, that was great. For all of us, it was lots of fun. But one thing in particular that I survived off of was coffee. And I'm going to throw to this ad for 1775 coffee. That's a rum. And there was a bunch of bags of coffee that were left around. So I thought, you know what? I've seen this advertiser before and I would like to try their coffee. And I can personally attest to them having great coffee because I took one of the bags that they had there as a sponsor of the event. And I brought it home and I actually gifted it to my husband as though it wasn't a free thing that I got as a sponsor. No, I told him it later, but he was like, oh, this is a new coffee. And he's so excited to try it. So anyway, it is great coffee. And if you want to support free speech and if you enjoy the free speech that Rumble is protecting and fighting for, then you can buy this coffee. So our show on Rumble is only possible thanks to our viewers supporting Rumble's platform by purchasing Rumble's products. Most of you drink coffee every day. That's why you have to try Rumble's 1775 coffee. It's actually the best coffee I've ever tried, and it's the same price as the coffee you buy now, but it is way better. Rumble's 1775 coffee is free from chemicals, yet rich in flavor. This is because their beans are sourced from high altitude farms in Bolivia, handpicked, roasted weekly at their facility in Miami, and delivered fresh to your doorstep. And as believers in freedom, buying from Rumble helps fight back against woke corporations like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. Join the coffee revolution and brew rebellion with Rumble's 1775 coffee. Go to 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO and get a free month's supply of their cognitive boosting supplement, Limitless, when you buy 2 bags of their coffee. Think about that. It is a crazy deal, and the supplement is worth more than the 2 bags of coffee. Go to 1775coffee.com and try their amazing coffee. So there you have it. I personally have tried their coffee, and it was great, and so great to know that there is not all those added chemicals and things. I don't know about you. I can't drink too much coffee, or I start to get a little bit hyper. So I have to limit my coffee intake. But it's definitely much needed day to day, but especially if you're out traveling. A nice little pick me up.
My husband's the coffee drinker for both of us. I drink.
Speaking of coffee and not really having much ambition here, the federal labor minister in Canada here, Stephen McKinnon, seems like he needs a little bit of extra motivation and boost, because the next story that we're sharing with you should, in my opinion, never have happened. So we have a massive strike that is encompassing our federally regulated rail line, the Canadian rail line. And here we have a CBC article. Teamsters Union serves Canadian National Rail, CN Rail, with 72-hour strike notice as the stoppage is ongoing. So this follows developments of federal labor minister's referral of dispute to the Canada Industrial Relations Board. It's just kind of like a washing of the hands, passing of the buck. And so this strike, which started, I believe it was yesterday, and then they were supposed to have reached a deal, and that hasn't gone through. And it's causing a mess with our economy, supply chains. There will be economic shortages. It will destroy confidence in our tradability with our strong economic superpower neighbors, United States. So this is big news happening in Canada, as you know, our economy is already struggling and under strain, and many countries are after the COVID pandemic, but especially as we see the very weak, again, in my opinion, ill-trained and ill-qualified ministers that Trudeau has put in place as part of his cabinet. This is just more piling and piling of mess on top of mess that I'm very nervous where this will head.
Well, out in BC, we had the strikes with the ports that was affecting the ports kind of in the same way here. And you're right, it is concerning because everything is intertwined here. I mean, this one is supposed to be 72 hours, but we've seen in that example where it lasted much longer. So yeah, we're going to have to watch this closely. It'd be nice if one of us could, I'm assuming they're having like protests and things like that too. So we might want to cover that. But yeah, I mean, there's a mess under the Trudeau government and you're seeing things like this happen, but I don't know what can be done. Oh, what are we showing there? Sorry.
Well, it just shows the radical ideological motivation of some of these unions, and you see the, you know, the Black Lives Matter adjacent fist here in the rail conference post to X, formerly Twitter, that they've served this strike notice to CN Rail, and this is amid ongoing bargaining negotiations between the union and the government that obviously haven't come to any kind of meaningful or fruitful discussion or resolution. And so now we have this looming strike. And interestingly enough, this is something that, of course, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who's supposed to be like for the working guy, is saying, so the Liberals have proposed implementing legislation to force the rail workers back to work. And now NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is saying that he would absolutely not support the Liberals in that endeavor, because here in Canada, we have an unofficial coalition between the NDP government and the Justin Trudeau Liberals. So two fringe minority, as Justin Trudeau called all of us who opposed their COVID-19 related mandates, orders, and diktats. We have two fringe minority governments having an unofficial coalition to form a majority government in the House of Commons and ram through and push through things that they see fit in direct conflict to what is a functioning working democracy, and also leaving out the vote of the Conservatives and lesser but still relevant, the Bloc. And so if Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, decides to pull his support of the Liberals over this issue, that could be the crumbling of this unofficial Liberal NDP coalition government. But I'm not holding my breath, because we have seen repeatedly over and over Jagmeet Singh say, oh, I'm so unhappy with Justin Trudeau and how can he do these things? And the Canadians are struggling and suffering, you know, all these political talking points that he likes to reference back to. And yet he still continues to prop up the Liberals in the House of Commons. And so these are just a lot of empty threats and empty words. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the constitutional enforcement or the challenge against the Liberals for trying to force the workers back to work, despite the bargaining not being fruitful, whether or not the NDP under Jagmeet Singh will actually pull its support for the Liberals, what will all happen here in the coming days. But definitely this is just another embarrassment on the world stage, and more so the North American stage, for our reliability and economic trade, in our ability to reach fruitful discussions and agreements with our workers and the unions. And it really hints, if you zoom out and look at the broader picture here, it really hints at the general turmoil that is happening in Canada between our elected leaders, what's happening with the economy, how people are struggling and suffering, and really that people have had enough. They're fed up. They're on edge. They can't stay afloat in today's inflation and economic period. And they're just done, and everything is crumbling. Actually, we have a clip here from Trudeau who says that he, of course, as always, is taking this so seriously. But in the copy of that tweet we posted, or that clip that we posted to X, you know, we say Canada continues to struggle economically, and now for the first time in history, under the Liberals' leadership, the country's two largest railways are on strike. But PM Trudeau says he's taking things so seriously.
I just visited a little incredibly innovative manufacturer here that works for Tesla and others in some really high-performing, high-quality manufacturing. But I talked also about the fact that they are going to be impacted if a shutdown of the rail system continues for much longer. And that's something that is an impact right across the country, from workers to businesses to farmers to consumers who are going to be impacted. That's why we are on this. We're taking it so seriously. The minister is engaged directly. We are not taking this lightly, obviously, because Canadians across the country are worried about it. And we will have more to say shortly on what we're doing to make sure that the right solution is found. quickly for the economy.
I don't know about you, Drea, but I think the right solution should have been found before it got to this point.
Well, that's always best. And it looks like they were, to prepare for the possible strike, which we're now in now, they were already halting shipments even beforehand. So that kind of extends how long this is lasting. So,
well, and how long it's been boiling to getting to this point. And then, of course, we had our out of touch, tone deaf Chrystia Freeland, the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, come in and try to somehow claim that Canada's moving in the right direction amid all of this.
Minister, with this potential rail stoppage looming, and just recently we saw port strikes cost the economy billions of dollars, how can you tell international trading partners Canada is a reliable place for business when labor disputes keep disrupting the flow of goods?
Canada is an extremely reliable place for business. Canada is an outstanding investment destination. And look, it's my job to say that, and I say it with utter belief and confidence. But guess what? Investors agree with me, and they are coming, and they are talking with their checks. This Polaris project is a huge investment on the part of Shell. Not too far from here, Dow has made a historic investment, their biggest investment ever in North America. We've had major investments from Honda, major investments from VW. This is a moment actually when the world is recognizing the Canadian advantage, whether that advantage is in our geological formations or our incredibly smart, innovative, hard-working people. I agree with you, though. Right now, Canada is really moving in the right direction economically. We've had inflation within the Bank of Canada's target range for 7 months. Interest rates have come down twice in a row. We have major foreign investment pouring into our country. And we simply cannot afford, we cannot tolerate a self-inflicted wound. And that's why I am saying, you know, with real seriousness to the companies and to the union, your country is counting on you. Your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, every single one of them needs you to do your job, take your responsibility seriously, and get a deal.
Yeah, I love when she says it's my job to say this, right? Like that her job is to make sure that all of our systems run smoothly. And I'm not sorry, and unfortunately, that has not been upheld throughout the last several years of the Justin Trudeau's reign over Canada, reign of terror, I should say, over Canada. But it's a monopoly too. The federal monopoly on the rail line. This probably wouldn't happen if there was a private sector involved. This wouldn't be happening if there was a private sector involved. And to say that this is, you know, we need to avoid a self-inflicted wound. Well, I think that Chrystia Freeland and her fellow cabinet ministers need to hold up a mirror, because this has very clearly been a deterioration in bargaining agreements that have not, again, been fruitful and come to fruition. And now we're faced with this really consequential strike that again is going to destroy our trade agreements, destroy confidence in our ability to uphold trade and be an economic superpower alongside the United States. If we can't even keep workers at work, then I think that's showing just the sad state of affairs that we're at here in this country and the failed leadership by these political aficionados.
Yeah. And she also says to take their job seriously. It's like you said, you should have been taking your job seriously from the get-go to help prevent this. So
exactly. Well, We have another super chat, or sorry, a Rumble rant, I should say, here from Ryerson Gary, another $5. Thank you, Ryerson Gary. Impossible to be as incompetent as the Trudeau cabal appear to be. Not acting to order mandatory arbitration is another deliberate action by Justin to destroy everything Canadian. Yeah, I mean, the repeated inaction of these ministers is really starting to have dire effects on everyday Canadians, right? They say people will kind of go along to get along. They'll feign ignorance. They'll just say, oh, well, what can I do? And go along in the street until it starts to hit them in the pocketbooks. And I think over the last few years, especially this past year, you're starting to see the consequences of people feeling this hurt in their pocketbooks, and they're fed up with this government. And yet we're stuck with it for at least another approximately a year, just over a year. I'm like, when is the next election? However, if Jagmeet Singh grows a spine, as he, claims that he's so upset, and if the Liberals do this, I'm pulling my support. And I think he's threatened that a handful of times over the last year or so. But if he does this time, then maybe, just maybe, an election would be sooner than we think. However, it looks like that probably won't be the case if history is any indication. And we're, another year plus from another election. So we're going to go to another ad here, and then we'll come back and talk about some general Canadian living news.
When the panel said, listen, give it to 6-month-old babies with zero assurances this possibly would be safe. I said, where were you the day when the WHO came out and said, do not use remdesivir in the hospital? I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Join me for an evening together. Tickets are on sale now.
Balls belong in women's sports, just as long as they're not attached to a biological male. Did you see the shameful moment in the Paris Olympics when Italian female boxer Angela Carini had to forfeit her match just seconds in because she was boxing against a biological male?
Solid straight right hand from police there. About being pulled off by the referee.
It was shocking. Angela said she had to quit because she had never been punched so hard. Now, Rebel News, we've been fighting to keep women's spaces safe, especially women's sports. If you agree with us, then you will love our new t-shirt design. So you can proudly say that you think women shouldn't have to be beaten up by biological males in their own sports. Our design says no human balls in women's sports. It's a bit cheeky, and it lets people know you stand with Angela and all the other female athletes like her who deserve better. Go to rebelnewsstore.com now to order your t-shirt today.
All right, we've talked a little bit about the soft justice system that we have in Canada, and that is so evident as we talk about this next story out of British Columbia, where an arsonist is now out on bail, of course, released on bail, catch and release that we hear so much about here in Canada, after setting fire to a British Columbia church. Drea, you're in British Columbia. You've been covering this since the fallout of the residential school claim of 215 unmarked graves. They've now been referred to as anomalies. Do you want to run through what's happening here in British Columbia with these with this particular church fire?
Well, I would love to. I'm just having some difficulties, Tamara, so sorry. I'm going to have to get you.
So this man here in Vernon, British Columbia, allegedly set fires outside of a Catholic church. And his name is Dylan Alexander Leon. He's 32. He's facing 1 count each of mischief over 5,000 and possession of incendiary material. He was arrested on Monday night, and there he was back on the streets, granted bail after a hearing on Tuesday afternoon. And so I think this is upwards of 100 churches now that have been targeted since, as I mentioned, that claim of there being 215 unmarked child graves at a residential school location. I won't even attempt to say the name of the band. Drea, you do it so well.
Yeah.
It's
Swim It. Yeah. I say it with confidence, and then that means I'm saying it right. But yeah, you pretty much did it right. But yeah, it's over 100 churches. Another one of those things that gets swept under the rug when it comes to actual hate in Canada. Of course, every single church that was, caught fire wasn't. I did a report on the CBC where they focused on like the ones that weren't, but the vast majority are, it's safe to say, connected to an attack of hate, but nobody wants to talk about that. And BC is where the church burning spree started. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, it's still happening here. And some of the churches that have burned, they're not even investigating them. Like there's the one that I covered, the old log church in Chicolton, and that person had committed crimes before, and he went out and burnt a church too. And they focused on the other sort of things that he did that night instead of, hey, what about this? So it's a very sick and concerning pattern when you see this attack happen on any place of worship, but it is a focus attack that gets ignored. And in BC, you get these slaps on the wrist so you can go out and do it again.
Well, exactly. That's the justice system, the catch and release policies that we have in place here. The police, I repeatedly hear just how frustrated they are with arresting, detaining, and charging these individuals only for them to be put in front of a judge and released back out into the streets to very likelihood of reoffend as they're released on bail.
But it says he's banned from having a lighter, so it's all good now.
Well, and these are beautiful, absolutely beautiful, historic, irreplaceable architecture churches that are being destroyed over a false claim. And I think that is quite literally the definition of misinformation. And it has been allowed, pun intended, to spread like wildfire with no real corrections to the record other than that court case, actually, Drea, that you just covered. I believe your report went out yesterday or is going out later today.
Yeah, I think it goes out today. But
yeah, and so I urge everyone to check that out when it is published and live. But that was a really interesting court case where the judge pushed back and said alleged, or what was the word that he used?
Yeah, I mean, it might be up now, but basically it was brought to my attention this an appeal. This went all the way to appeal where they alleged that the judge engaged in residential school denialism and was biased because during the sentencing hearing, a Judge Fitzpatrick, when the counsel for this criminal who had breached the Trans Mountain Pipeline injunction, they were talking about, they've done volunteer work to help with the 215 bodies that were discovered at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And so Judge Fitzpatrick says, well, I don't think they were unearthed. And then there's this dialogue. So I go through it all. But basically, because the judge corrected the record as a judge should do and made sure the facts were correct as they're being said to the court and said, no, it's potential remains, and not even remains, potential burials. They actually took that to appeal to say she was biased and a denialist. And it actually was heard. I mean, we've covered cases that don't even get heard. Like if you're a school trustee like Barry Newfield and you're getting all of these things said about you because you're standing against the sexual orientation, gender identity stuff going in schools, you don't get your your appeal heard. And then this goes all the way. And thankfully, it was an Indigenous judge, Chief Justice, who oversaw that and dismissed that case. But it's quite radical that a false claim could be made 3 years later, 100 burnt, vandalized churches, $7.9 million given to the band that made the false claim for the discovery that never was. And now it's in our courts. We have actual lawyers hear a judge correct the record and say, hey, no, there was no body. And that same lawyer thinks that it's a good argument to go to the appeals because they still can't even find the truth. I'm assuming they looked online and went, oh, CBC says it's real, so it must be true.
What a sad state of affairs here in Canada. And, we are repeatedly scolded on spreading misinformation and disinformation. And this is a huge point of contention within this story because that is textbook mis and disinformation and information that is shared with the intent to deceive. And it is a very sad state of affairs that people aren't able to sift through the information on their own. And it just shows the stranglehold that the mainstream media still has on the general population that is unable to go out and seek and information gather on their own, which, I mean, if you have a functioning media that's unbiased, that's reporting the facts and sticking to them, then you don't necessarily need to go out and information gather on your own because you have a trustworthy, reliable media source. And sadly, the mainstream media and our state broadcaster just isn't that anymore. Yeah. Now we're going to run through just another quick ad before we get to the last few stories of the day. It's Be Naked. So in today's society, it's tough to be a man in a world dominated by overly masculine liberal women. That's just not how it's meant to be. Everywhere we look, it's gender neutral, this product or made for her, that product. That is why we started a company that embodies the ethos of men's lives matter too, with products that aren't designed to be gender neutral or used by people with pronouns. Our products at Rumble are designed and built for men by men, period. So if you struggle with low energy, mood swings, or hair loss, or if you need to perform better at the gym, maybe in bed, and recover quicker after, throw out all your other garbage supplements and try animal organs. They are traditionally the most nutrient-rich supplements on the planet. But our bison organs are a step above. The grass-fed, non-vaccinated bison are a species where the weak are allowed to die and only the strongest survive. So here's our commitment to you from men who have real confidence in their products. Try this today, and if you don't like it, fine. Return it for a refund. Go to benaked.com, code STUDIO, and get 15% off today. Sounds really interesting.
You gotta love our sponsors.
Hey, I'm on the non-vaccinated train. I'm like, yes, if it is grass-fed and non-vax, give it a whirl. Bison organs. I mean, we know that organ meat is so nutrient dense and is very rich in all of the proteins and minerals that you would need to get in a robust diet. Speaking of the Aboriginals, they used to eat almost every part, all the organs of the animal. And they had amazing health, the bone structure of the jaw, their teeth, the vitamin D levels housed within some of these organs is amazing. And so, hey, I might just send that to my husband. Tell him to give it a whirl.
No, I was thinking of my husband. I could see him growling after taking
some bison organs. Yeah, as soon as you say non-vaxxed, I'm like, all right. Non-tainted is how
they know how to speak to our hearts.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So in Canada, we've touched a little bit about the cost of living crisis. We're going through this further economic devastation through failed leadership with the CN rail strike. And now we have MPs, our members of parliament, in question period, questioning a diplomat's high living. Well, as mentioned, Canadians struggle to make ends meet. So in this particular story, it comes as Conservative MP Michael Barrett has been pressing the committee on an $8.84 million Manhattan penthouse purchase for Consul General Tom Clark. He's the guy that previously asked Trudeau in the airplane what shampoo he uses, as though like that is just the burning question on the minds of every Canadian, what shampoo the Prime Minister uses.
Wow.
In case you're wondering what the landscape looked like when Trudeau was elected, that was it. It was the socks and the hair.
Socks,
It
the
wasn't
hair,
any policy or hard stance on anything other than legalizing marijuana. That is basically the only thing I can think of that Trudeau has done that anybody remembers on any sort of, like, I say meaningful level, but I don't even really mean it as meaningful because it was legalizing marijuana. Here we have the clip here. So this is Tom Clark, who has an $8.8 million Manhattan penthouse paid for on the backs of Canadian taxpayers. This is his, concerning question here to the Prime Minister a few years ago.
So I guess the first thing I should ask you is, are you feeling lucky? I mean, the entire country wants to know. What shampoo do you use?
What a disappointing answer this is going to be. Whatever happens to be hanging around at the time.
I don't know. He says disappointing answer. I think what a disappointing question.
Yeah, it was a disappointing question. I mean, all Trudeau's answers are disappointing, so I guess that's consistent. But yeah, imagine you get this exclusive interview with the leader of the country. You're in this great setting, and that's what you ask, and Trudeau's laugh. It's like, yes, But
Yay, another softball. I can do this is what he's probably thinking in the back of his mind. But there's a couple
$9
clips.
million. I guess it pays. It pays fast, those kind of questions as a journalist or whatever.
Yeah, former.
Former.
So there was the Treasury Board meeting, and I'm not sure if this is the first clip in the article, but the MP Barrett just keeps poking. Is this a requirement for the council's mandate to have this swanky tile? I think it was like a copper or a porcelain soaker tub. All of these high-end luxury items in his penthouse in Manhattan. 24/7 security. He has gym. The pool has swimming lanes. I think it might be, I'm just going to pull up if it's this first clip here, or if we can pull up the clip where they're pressing on all of these luxury items that are in this penthouse. I don't think it's the second clip, Larry Brock. This one here. We won't play it all, but it's just maybe the first minute or so. It's really fun, sad, but funny to see.
Now, I know there is a lot that has been written in our nationals with respect to the extravagant nature of this acquisition. There was a quote from Global Affairs, I appreciate, not attributable to anyone here, but I wish to read it out to the record. The residence currently used for the head of mission and Consul General in New York, this is the Park Avenue property, was purchased in 61, last refurbished in 82. The apartment does not meet new building codes nor Global Affairs standards. Now, the purchase at West 57th is listed as follows. There is an elegant entry foyer with white Makuba stone floors. Is that a requirement for the Consul General of Canada?
Perhaps in answering that question, I've sort of alluded to it before. You only hold real property to support.
Ma'am, that's not my question.
Right.
Is it a requirement of Mr. Clark's position as Consul General in New York that he has white Makuba stone floors? Is that a requirement?
That's not.
I'm just curious.
It's not a Treasury Board requirement.
Okay. A stunning powder room finished in jewel onyx. Another requirement of Consul General?
Of the Treasury Board Secretariat, that would not be a requirement in our policy.
Custom smoke gray oak floors in a parquet pattern. Would that be a requirement, Mr. Clark?
So basically, she just says, I think I can answer no to all of your questions. And he keeps listing off all of these high-end finishes and the building amenities, which includes, as I mentioned, a 25-meter 2-lane swimming pool with private cabanas, a separate sauna and treatment room, a fitness center, private lounge, a golf simulator, and even a children's playroom. So Canadian taxpayers, as you're lining up in record numbers at food banks, who actually just today, there was one, I believe it was in Brampton, ran out of food. The demand is so high in Canada for just a simple basic necessity of such as food. The food bank has never run out of food before in the history of its creation. And just this week, food bank in Ontario ran out of food and was no longer able to supply everybody until donations came back in. So I think it closed for actually a couple of days. Our article just went up this morning on that. I'm not sure if we can show it on screen, but the food bank had to close down that day and for a couple of days until they were able to restockpile. And meanwhile, Tom Clark is over here in his 25-lane swimming pool with private cabanas. Yeah, here it is. The Salvation Army in Brant County was forced to shut down its Paris, Ontario location after it ran out of donations. And so until they generate that stockpile back up again, they're closed. And so, sorry, no food for you, but maybe you can go to Tom Clark's house in Manhattan and see if he has any scraps to throw from his penthouse balcony. In Ontario, we also have Minister Jones. I'm just going to throw to this last clip as we wrap up the stream. I think we lost Drea, so sorry about that. But our health minister, Sylvia Jones, has admitted the failures of safe supply drug policy, and the province has begun to walk back that policy initiative and that drug policy reform. She, in this clip, reveals extremely alarming incidences of violent assaults, crimes, and fatalities near drug consumption sites all across the province. And arguably, that is just a microcosm of what is happening all across the country. Have a listen to this.
I've also heard that the status quo of drug consumption sites is not working. Parents are worried about discarded needles that their children could pick up. Some parents no longer feel comfortable sending their children to the local elementary school or have pulled them out of their local daycare. Businesses and communities are concerned about disruptive behavior that increases crime around drug consumption sites that impact their communities. Just last year, for example, compared to the rest of the city, there was a 113% increase in reports of assault near these sites in Toronto. Violent crime was up 146% near Ottawa's Somerset site, and homicide was 450% higher near Hamilton's urban core. I've also heard that the status quo.
It is absolutely devastating what's happening to public safety in and around these sites. And so this shift in the stance of the province is really following that Alberta recovery and treatment-oriented approach. And so I had a full report on this that same day where the minister admits safe supply is a failure and they're shifting to a recovery-oriented strategy. And there's some stipulations now around existing safe consumption sites and harm reduction sites. And so they're implementing a $378 million investment in what is being called Homelessness and Addiction Recovery and Treatment, acronymed HEART, hubs across the province. And this comes to after the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, that was at that meeting in Ottawa earlier this week, but this comes as the, I think it's called, the Ontario Big City Mayors Association last week launched a Solve the Crisis campaign, calling on all levels of government to do something to solve this blatant vagrancy, the open air drug use, the compromises to public safety that are happening in and around the vicinities of harm reduction, safe supply, purported drug use hubs, and the burgeoning encampments that are coming as a result of what happened at the top, the Canadian Drug and Substance Use Strategy implemented in 2017 by the Justin Trudeau Liberals with their radical drug reform policy frameworks. Contributed over $1 billion since that time to implement these various strategies, are showing to wreak havoc on our streets, in our neighborhoods, and in our communities, putting the public safety of what I would call the actual most vulnerable in our population, which is our children and our elderly, at risk. So I think this is a very much needed pivotal reform that is starting to take place in this shift in strategy. But we'll see how it's actually implemented. Repeatedly, it's just throw money at it and hope it goes away. And it doesn't. It just continues to grow and manifest and balloon. So we'll see. But I think this is a welcome announcement for many Ontarians who are feeling increasingly unsafe in their neighborhoods, and especially, children at going to school, daycare centers. And so they place some stipulations around those facilities specifically. I argue it's not enough. It's 200 meters that they can't open any of these sites within 200 meters of childcare or school centers. I say that's not enough, but we'll see how these changes come to fruition. Just as we wrap things up here tonight, we are doing a special live stream. You can tune in to our special broadcast of the Arcola Rodeo, coming to you live from Arcola, Saskatchewan. Watch some of the top cowboys compete for buckles and cash. The event will feature world-class animal athletes and events such as bareback riding, saddle bronc riding, bull riding, wild horse racing, and barrel racing. It starts at 6:30 p.m. CST, which is 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and can be seen exclusively on rebelnews.com and, of course, our Rumble channel. So that wraps up. I don't think we have any more Rumble rants to get to. Sadly, we lost Drea's connection. So we're just a little bit past 2 o'clock here, and I'm going to wrap things up. We'll have a team of Rebels back here again on Monday, same time, same place. So join us preferably on Rumble from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. And I hope that everybody has a great weekend. I'm Tamara Ugolini with Rebel News. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Well, we made it very clear that we would always oppose back to work legislation. I made that very clear to Justin Trudeau. I looked him right in the eyes and said, we will never support any back to work legislation. Never count on us. You'll have to go to Conservatives, who are the enemy of working people. You can go to yourself, because we know the Liberals have sold out working people again and again with back to work legislation, forcing them back to work, undermining their rights. So if that's the path the Liberals want to go, we're going to fight them every step of the way. We made it very clear. I said, whether it's confidence or not, I don't care. We're going to vote against any measure that attacks working people. Back to work, binding arbitration, we'll be voting against it. We'll be fighting it every step of the way. I made that abundantly clear to Justin Trudeau, and I make that clear again today.
Are you willing to break this unconstitutional?
Well, if it's a confidence vote, that's breaking the agreement. We always have the right to withdraw our support from the agreement that we have. That remains our position. We can always pull away. We can always break it. But I'll make it very clear: if Justin Trudeau brings in any measure that attacks workers' rights, we will vote against it. Confidence or not, agreement or not, we will vote against it, and we will stand up for working people.
Are you coming to a Rebel News Live in Calgary this October? We've added another great speaker, political science professor emeritus at the University of Calgary, Tom Flanagan, the renowned author who co-authored the best-selling book, Grave Error: How the Media Misled Us and the Truth About Residential Schools. You know, they say that us Canadians, we're just so nice, but I think we're just good at biting our tongues, even when doing so can be detrimental to our nation. Like all of the cowardly politicians, historians, and journalists whose silence is still breathing life into the false 2021 claim that the remains of 215 Indigenous children have been discovered in unmarked graves at BC's former Kamloops Indian Residential School. But that's the opposite of what will be happening during our in-person Rebel News Live event coming to Calgary October 5th. Our Rebel News Live will feature many of your favorite Rebel reporters, including yours truly, and conservative and freedom-minded speakers like Mr. Tom Flanagan, who uses his expertise to prove that we're not the racist child slaughterers who must forever be in shame and reconciliation, as they'd like us to think. It's been 3 years, nearly over 100 burnt and vandalized churches, and millions of taxpayer dollars later, and still not a single body has been discovered in an unmarked grave at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. And Tom Flanagan is not afraid to say that, and we're not afraid to give him a stage to do so. If you haven't already, go to rebelnewslive.com. Buy your tickets at the early bird pricing, which is still available, and there's still some tickets for VIP, where you'll not just be able to meet us, but also eat and hang out with us after the conference. Again, that's rebelnewslive.com. I'll see you there.